Alright, hey guys, me again, you know who I am, and today I'm here to talk about free alternatives to Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro. Also, I guess in a way there's also be an alternative to Sony Vegas, because I know a lot of people use Adobe Premiere and Sony Vegas out there on the YouTube space. And I wanted these to be free. Now, the reason I went looking for alternatives to these softwares is because I wanted something to recommend to my viewers, but that wasn't like pirated or whatnot. And pirating has its own issues, but let's be honest here, okay? Most of the people on YouTube here either pirate Adobe Premiere or they pirate Sony Vegas. To be honest, the softwares are way too expensive for what they do or what they are used for on YouTube anyways. All right, for movies and TV shows, I guess that's a little different. But even then, I decided to grab these. Not only do these perform better, like hardware-wise, they're snappier. It's way more stable than Sony Vegas, especially, and Premiere Pro, because I hate those crashing issues, and I decided just to turn away from it and find something else. And this is what I found. Now, this is Davinci Resolve, made by Blackmagic, and it is free. And there's no real drawbacks to the free version versus the studio version. They did add a brand new feature called the Cut tab, but they literally updated this last week. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you Davinci Resolve 15.3.1, but the latest version as of this video is 16.0 Beta 1. All right, and before you be alarmed about the beta in the name, don't worry about that. It's beta in the same way Warframe is in beta, as in it updates features and it adds new ones all the time on top of its existing architecture instead of making like new versions, I guess. So that's what they mean by beta for the most part. Now, it does work on every single operating system, Mac, Windows, and Linux. Now, the difference between the regular version and the studio version is the studio version gives you support for their personal hardware. All right, and you don't honestly need that because the general audience or the general public is not going to go out and buy these editor keyboard or little panels to help with editing or whatnot, because these seem way out there if you just want to make simple videos. All right, and it really doesn't limit you on anything. Also, the studio version has a multi-user collaboration feature, just like Google Drive. So basically, two people can be working on the same project at once. That is available in the studio version, as well as some extra plugins and stuff like that. But you don't even need those, and there are third-party plugins anyways that you can add. So to get this, you can just hit download now and hit whatever operating system you're using. So I'm using Windows. And now you do have to register. It's not that big of a deal. You'll have to do this for every update because the updates are not automatic. And there's some pros and cons to the updates not being automatic. I just go ahead and download the latest version. I need to update my version of Davinci Resolve a little later. But for now, I'll show you Davinci Resolve 15.3.1. So let's open up both programs. So right off the bat, you see that we have databases here, and what that is basically this is where you're going to save your projects to. All right, so if you don't like the default location, it has its own location inside the C drive somewhere. All right, but if you don't like that location, you can make a new database here and basically choose a location for it. So I'm going to open up a new project and title it. I'm just going to call it Test Showcase. All right, and this is the interface. Now, there's a couple of things that I've changed by default, but one thing right off the bat is the layout is not very customizable. For instance, if you change the way, say, your video and your audio appears in your timeline, those won't save, but other things will. It's pretty weird. All right, and of course, by default, it has the source window for your videos and whatnot, and your project window. But with Davinci Resolve, you can go into preferences and then go to user and project save and load, and you have an option to live save. And what this does is it saves after every single edit. Now there's a little performance hitch, so Davinci Resolve won't run nearly as smoothly, but it's great. Also, if you wanted to change your sequence settings for whatever reason, you can just press the gear down at the bottom here. You can do that all here. And if you wanted to open a project, it's just down here, home icon. And then there's your project manager with all your stuff. First things first, we need to talk about the tabs. Basically, Davinci Resolve is like almost all of the video editing. No, it is all of the video editing software in Adobe Creative Suite roll up into literally one program, and it runs pretty well too. So we have your media tab, your edit tab for do editing. They have a new cut one, which is like a compact version of this. And Fusion is basically your After Effects. All right, it's motion, where you do all your motion graphics and stuff like that. And then we have color, and this is the best coloring tool on the market for color grading right now. In fact, it is so good that people often export their project into here, color grade it, and then export it back into Premiere Pro. I'm not kidding. It's that good. Now, in the Fairlight tab, this is basically your Adobe Audition. You have like de-essers, other plugins and stuff like that. The basic stuff that you'll need. You even have your dynamics here. If we go into Premiere Pro here and we make a new project, and it's basically the equivalent of the dynamics audio effect, which you can place on audio. Let's import some footage here into both softwares. Now, say I want to export my footage. All I'd have to do is go to File, Export, Media, and then of course I'd have to choose what format that I want to export in. And if I had a preset, I could just pull up from here, and then I'd export. I'd either queue it into Adobe Media Encoder, or I'd export it into Premiere Pro. Now, a lot of times what happened with Premiere Pro or even Sony Vegas is that while this happens, the program crashes, or the program crashes your computer, and then you have to restart all over again, and you have to do that over and over and over again until it doesn't happen, basically. And that's kind of a nightmare. And so basically with Adobe Premiere, at least, you were forced to use Adobe Media Encoder, which is it's a standalone program that is specifically designed to export footage and whatnot. And then there's my project with there's the project name, and then there's the project preset. I can change this here if I really want to. And then I just hit press play, and then I'd be exporting the footage with whatever renderer I choose. Now with Davinci Resolve, I can also set presets and change the format and the codec and whatnot to whatever I really want it to be. All right, I have all those options. Now, network optimization. If you're uploading this to a website, you want this checked. This greatly speeds up the upload time, and it doesn't sacrifice any quality. So honestly, I just always have that check. And basically, you just copy whatever your settings were from Premiere Pro or whatnot, or whatever software you used. Now, when you export it, you give it a name here by pressing Browse. So I just call it Test, right? And choose what hard drive I want to save it to. I always save my exported stuff to my H drive. Hit save, there's test, there's the location, and then I add that to the render queue. And if I want to start the render, I just press start render, and then it will be rendering it from here. All right, so one thing to note by default is that Davinci Resolve has audio scrubbing turned on by default. So all you have to do to disable that is go into timeline here and turn off, because otherwise, like, it sounds like this when you go backwards and forward. Basically, you hear the audio when you go back and forth between the clips. Personally, I don't like that. I don't know why anyone would want that, so I just have it turned off, and it's off by default in Premiere. In fact, I don't think that's even a feature in this version of Premiere Pro. Now, effects control is very simple. Say if I wanted to turn down the volume in say this clip, all I have to do is just set it to a negative something, and then I have a lower volume now. Where in Davinci Resolve, I have to go to my inspector. This pushes your source window aside in Davinci, where it doesn't do that in Premiere, but it's fine. It doesn't matter that much anyways. I have my inspector almost on all the time now. And the way you just change, basically you change stuff like position. You can change how zoomed in it is, and just all your things. You can do that in your inspector. So your inspector is the equivalent of the effects control. If I want to turn on the audio, I just go to the audio tab and I take clip volume, and I do the exact same fucking thing. Ta-da. Now, if I wanted text on top of my video, say I made a small little mistake in the video and I wanted to correct that with like a little caption or whatnot, I go to my effects library, titles, text, I drag it onto my clip. All right, and then on the inspector, it will automatically show up as I click on it, basically. And I can just type whatever I want into here. I can now, if I want to move it up and down, I use the position, so I can move it side to side if I want to, and I can move it down and up. What the fuck? I went a little ham there. Say I typically have my text right there, and then I typically put a stroke on it, which you can do here as well. Now I will alert you that the stroke is an inner stroke. It's not an outer stroke. All right. So for instance, if I want to recreate the, say, subtitles of something like Crunchyroll subtitles, which is typically Trebuchet MS with 150 width. I can't actually do that because the stroke is inside stroke and not an outside stroke. All right, and you can see the more higher it is, the more my text looks very small. So let's talk about like cutting and stuff. So you have your cut tool in Premiere Pro. What you can do is cut. Say if I want this section out, for instance, I just click on it. I cut it into 2 parts, and then I click on it with the move tool. Press delete. Click on this little area here, and then I click delete again, and then that will ripple delete, basically move all the footage forward from what it was cut out. Now in Davinci Resolve, it's a tiny bit different. There's different hotkeys for regular deletes and ripple deletes. So right off the bat, you do the same thing to delete your footage, but as soon as I press delete, it's automatically ripple delete. The reason is because ripple delete has its own hotkey, and regular delete also has its own hotkey. And for ripple deletes, it's just the delete key. But if I wanted to do a regular delete and I didn't want to move the footage forward, I just do the same thing. But instead of pressing delete, I press backspace, and that will do that. Other than those small little caveats there, they're literally the same thing basically, except I have a bit more features here where I have an option to do motion graphics and color grading and audio editing. And I can even change the dynamics of it. Now, I will say about the dynamics is that if you have a limiter and makeup on, for instance, your makeup will take priority over your limiter, unlike in Premiere Pro, where the limiter takes priority over the makeup. And what that means is if I get a clip with voice here. All right, so here's some footage I have with my voice in it from older videos. So my voice kind of peaks a lot, and the way I get rid of doing that is with the dynamics tool in Adobe Premiere Pro, and there's a dynamics in Davinci Resolve that I showed you. But what I mean by that is, so here's my voice. I would honestly say that these 2 challenges are relatively easy, if not very reasonable. It's extremely fucking loud, and it hurts my ears. So I fixed that by going to the dynamics tool in effect, and I edit, and I have my settings basically. So I'll turn the limiter on, and I'll put this down to 0.6, and then I have the makeup by default is at like 3 decibels. I also crank that up. I put that up at 6, but if I don't like it because I hear like humming in the background, I'll turn it down to 4. But I'll just put it on the limiter for now and complete. The only thing is it's time consuming, and that's really the main drawback. That's immediately better. All right. Now the same thing can be said same thing as in Davinci Resolve. All right, it's just a bit more complicated. I have to turn on the compressor and the limiter and make the settings the same. So I changed my dynamic settings to be similar to what I have in Premiere here. All right, minus the makeup. And right off the bat, you'll notice that my threshold for my limiter is higher. It's at 12.1 instead of 6. And that being because I need to take into account the makeup. Otherwise, you see this line here? As I put this down to 6, and you see the line goes up. And that means if I don't like put it down to like 12, for instance, basically if I don't double it, it's going to peak like crazy. One other important thing before we get to the next software is that in Premiere Pro, if you wanted to go full screen and watch your project, you just press the tilde key, which is right next to your 1 and under the escape key to go full screen. You'd have to just click on that window and tilde. And then if you didn't want that, you can just press it again to undo it. And Davinci Resolve, the way you do that is different. So if you wanted to do that, and tilde doesn't do anything. So the way you do that is Control F, and that will full screen your project and everything so you can see it in all its glory. All right, moving on. So our next piece of software, kinda, but not really. This is our Photoshop killer. This is Photopea. Photopea is Photoshop, but as you can see, it's browser-based. So there are some pros and cons to it being browser-based. For instance, I didn't initially like it being browser-based. I wanted to just download it and like use it and be able to use it offline, but you can't do that. But the good thing about this is you can use this on any browser. So if I went into Chrome here and just type in Photopea, it works on this. And of course, if you even go to Microsoft Edge and Photopea, it works on here. Basically, the pro to using it here is that it works if you're using like a mobile device, like a tablet or something. It's pretty handy, which is pretty handy for you people that draw digitally, and this might be your new tool. And because it is browser based, it can't take advantage of the codecs from your GPU or your CPU. So there's no like, what do I want to say, like hardware acceleration. But let me compare this to our pirated Photoshop here. And for the most part, it is the exact same tool. It even has the quick selection tool, which a lot of like Photoshop computers don't have. With Photoshop computers, is that how many of them have the quick select tool? And this is the only one I found that does. Now, the only like real differences between the Photoshop and Photopea is that, say, if you use like plugins, like say to make textures for video games, if that's required of you to use in Photoshop, then you're going to use Photoshop naturally. But if you're just making thumbnails for things like YouTube, Photopea is totally fine. Now, the one caveat that I do have as using this versus the regular Photoshop is that Photoshop transforms text a bit better than Photopea, but that's honestly the only real downside that I found. All right, you can even put in fonts here. So it has a selection of fonts, and if it doesn't have a font, you can download it or you can load it into the program. Okay, I'm not sure what this glitch is with the text scrolling on top of each other, but for my thumbnails, I like League Gothic, and they have League Gothic, so I can just load that in. And now that I have my font loaded into the program, I can just type away with it. There's also another thing that you need to be aware of. So for you desktop users, if you're going to use this on your desktop, a lot of things have control and then a letter command, say on Photoshop. If I were going to transform this text in Photoshop, it would just be Control-T, right? And I can just move it around, change its size, whatnot, and that's all dandy. But in Photopea, Control-T by default is just open a new tab. So instead of doing that, you'll have to do Control-Alt-T, and then that will do. So basically, if it's a browser command by default, you're gonna have to add an Alt to your regular commands, and that will basically get it to work. Now let me show you like the text. The snap tool is much stickier in Photoshop than it is in Photopea, whereas I can just do this, and I have a lot of it doesn't snap to the bottom of this layer here, which is slightly annoying when you transform. But I mean, you can get around it. It's not that bad. But like I said, Photoshop handles text a little bit better. So if I were to do say the same thing in Photoshop, it snaps and it snaps, and that looks a tiny bit better because there are guides here and there. And if I want to increase it, size, and that would be the way I do it in Photoshop, whereas in Photopea, it just went it expanded straight to the bottom. There's some ways around it, of course, by just making it smaller. But everything else is the same. It's the same process as I did it in Photopea as in Photoshop. So honestly, if you're looking to like learn Photoshop, but you don't have Photoshop, you didn't buy Photoshop, and you don't feel like pirating Photoshop, you use Photopea. This is what you use. And if I wanted to say name my project or whatever, I just had to double click on the tab and then change its name to whatever I want it to be. So and then what I have to do then, if I want to export it, is go and save it as whatever I want. I like to save things as PNG because they're higher quality. And all right, and I can see that everything's good. I can also, if you lower the quality, it lowers the size, same way it does in Photoshop. But I'll just save it, and then I get a download link, and it'll download to wherever my default downloads are in my browser. And then, now for instance, for this example, mine is my downloads. So if I go into my downloads, there is my thumbnail right there. Okay. Anyway, guys, that's all for me. I want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.